Hello and welcome to Property Money Trees Maximising Property Values, the once a month show where I break down the steps of how to recognise, enhance, and then extract the values in property in order to create wealth. Would you like to find out how you can benefit from the steps of maximising property values? This is even if you don't own a property yet or have a deposit. If that's a yes, then you're in the right place to find out. My name is Patricia Faber, and although many know me for my work as a solicitor, on this show you will be getting the benefit of my 30 plus years worth of experience of maximising property values, experience which has given me a net worth in millions. So who might benefit from listening to this show? Literally anyone with an interest in creating property wealth. I've been looking at the Section 13 procedure and how that's going to work, on how it's now going to have to work. And I thought it might be a good idea to have a talk about it. So we have to, if as landlords have to now use the Form 4A. So a lot of landlords, a lot of people, when the government releases forms, prescribed forms. So prescribed forms are forms that effectively you can't deviate from, and if you do, whatever you've done is ineffective. So whenever the government releases these forms, some people will actually just save them and then use them from when they've saved them. Now, that's not a good idea because prescribed forms can be updated and you have to use the very latest version. Otherwise, again, it's going to be ineffective. So the form in question is the Form 4A. So it's a very, very good form. I like the new forms because they're very easy to read, they're attractive, and they should be easy to use. But there is a problem with Form 4A. So it's titled The Landlord's Notice Proposing a New Rent for Assured Tenancies in the Private Rented Sector. And then it quotes the legislation, which is Housing Act of 1988, Section 13, subsection 2, as amended. So this is the landlord's notice that's going to go to the tenant. So it carries on. This notice tells you that your landlord is proposing a new rent. So, and then it says which forms need to be used. So that is mainly for the landlords. And then it says this notice must be served on the tenants at least 2 months before the new rent can start. So again, that is all good. Very, very clear. Then in the side column, there's a note to landlords. And now this is what makes it a prescribed form. These notes must always be on what goes to the tenant eventually. So information for the tenant. This notice is given by your landlord to propose that you pay an increased rent from the date in question 4.6. You should read this notice in full immediately. If you disagree with the proposed rent or have any questions about this notice, you should discuss it with your landlord and or seek advice. To challenge the proposed rent, you must take action before the date given in question 4.6. There is information in section 5 on how to take action if you disagree with the proposed rent and where you can find advice. So then the form proper then starts. So, number 1, tenant details, the name of the tenants. Number 1.2, the address of the premises that the tenancy relates to. Number 2, details of the landlord, contact address, including postcode, contact details, phone number, and email. But those are said to be optional, and you don't have to give them. But if you do give them, then you can. You're agreeing that the tribunal and the tenant can contact you by email, stroke phone. Details of the agent. So this is number 3. If applicable, so that means if there's an agent, the details will go there. And again, their contact details, their address, their phone number, their email address. Again, those are optional. Then number 4, so this is really important. Part 4 is very, very important. So it's headed the rent. So 4.1 has the box the current rent. So that's what is called the passing rent. It's what the tenant is actually paying or supposed to be paying right now. And then the next box says the frequency. So that would be per week, per month, per 10 days, per whenever. It's going to be per month anyway, per week or per month. 4.2, the tenancy started on. So again, the day, the month, and the year will be filled in. 4.3, the most recent increase, if applicable, was on the day, the month, and the year. Now, this is what is confusing, will be confusing to most people. Now, these forms are meant to be usable by anyone. You're not supposed to have a law degree in order to actually fill out these forms. As long as you can read and write, you should be able to. But this 4.3 has a bit of an issue. So let's go to the notes in the column. So 4.3 says, if there has not been a rent increase since the start of the tenancy, leave it blank. But you see, that's not the point though, because what 4.3 is trying to ascertain is whether, well, no, sorry, what is relevant is whether or not there's been a rent increase using the Section 13 procedure within the last year. Now, if there hasn't been, then this current notice would be valid. But if there has been, then the notice would be invalid. So how is the tribunal going to tell if the notice is valid or not? They're going to look at box 4.3 and say, oh no, that was done within 12 months of this new notice. So that's where the danger lies. Now, in a year's time, it will no longer be an issue, but it is an issue right now. Because if the parties had agreed a rent increase, it wouldn't have been an increase under Section 13. If the parties had used a contractual rent increase clause, again, it would be outside of Section 13. So that meaning that the new notice would be okay, would be valid, subject to other things, of course. So that is something that you guys need to just bear in mind. Some people are saying they're going to leave it blank. Some people are saying they're going to make a note. However it is, just be aware that it really is only going to be important in the main if a prior Section 13 increment had actually taken place. Then 4.4 says, give the date of the first rent increase after 11 February 2003. First rent increase. Now, if you've had a tenant for, say, 10 years, it might be tricky to find out when. Although, if for most of us, you actually use you only receive rent via your bank account, then maybe it won't be that difficult to find out, because you can just go through all the payments made by a particular tenant and you'll be able to see when the amounts actually changed. But these are things to just bear in mind. Then 4.5 says the landlord is proposing a new rent of, and then you fill in the amount and you fill in the frequency. And then 4.6, the new rent will start on, and then again, there are boxes for the day, the month, and the year. Now, remember 4.6, you have to give at least 2 months' notice to the tenant regarding when the new rent is going to take place. Now, you see, from my point of view, I don't want to be calculating fractions of days or months for rent. So I'm going to make it to a rent payment date. So 2 months, a clear 2 months to a rent payment date, although that isn't actually specified. Then 4.7 talks about certain bills or charges that may be included in your rent. So some people actually pay for their tenants' heating and their tenants' hot water, especially in certain blocks of flats where those services are provided in any event as part of the service charges. So again, it gives an opportunity to actually let the tribunal know that that's going to happen, because you see, literally every single Section 13 challenge is going to be dealt with on paper with no hearing. So the form is actually going to be really, really important, because this is what the tribunal is going to be looking at. And then the landlord has to sign it, and then it tells part 5 what the tenant should do next. It tells them what to do, where to go, how to get advice. If they want to challenge it, go to tribunal. If they challenge it in tribunal, it's £47. And then there are extra sheets where the landlord can actually put more information. So now that is that. So now let me go to something else. So that is just the form. Now, how is it going to be best for landlords to actually deal with this new regime? When the tribunal is looking at these, what it's trying to do is look for comparable evidence of the rents. So the thing that I did was on this, what is comparable evidence? What should be put in there? What should a landlord be looking for? And again, so as far as I'm concerned, the PRS is like a coin. On the one side, you've got landlords. On the other side, you've got tenants. So, what all this information is relevant to both parties. But, in terms of comparable evidence, and both parties are actually looking for this. So the landlord's looking for it, the tenant's looking for it. So let me go through it. So when a Section 13 rent increase is challenged, the tribunal's task under Section 14 is to decide the rent at which the property might reasonably be expected to be let in the open market by a willing landlord on a tenancy with the same periods and terms. So that in itself is becoming slightly redundant, because all tenancies are going to be on the same periods. We're now on periodic tenancies from month to month. It is a evaluation exercise, not a fairness contest. Tribunal is not asking what the tenant can afford or what the landlord would like, but what the market would pay for this property today. So that is on the day of the determination. Tribunal panels can bring their own expertise and local knowledge, but the party who puts the better evidence of that market in front of them is going to be way ahead. Now, the statute also tells the tribunal to disregard certain things. So any premium or discount attributable to the tenant being a sitting tenant is ignored. So we can just forget about that. So that's good. Improvements the tenants carried out voluntarily are ignored. So if the tenant has to do certain things contractually, then as long as obviously it doesn't fall foul of the Tenant Fees Act, then that can be taken into account in when fixing the rent. But if it's done voluntarily, it's going to be ignored, because the thinking behind that is that a tenant can't have their rent raised on the back of their own new, for example, kitchen. Any reduction in value caused by the tenant's failure to comply with the tenancy is also ignored. So disrepair, that is the landlord's responsibility, is not disregarded, but a property with a leaking roof or damp will command less on the open market, and a tenant will evidence that if they know what they're doing. So, what makes a letting genuinely comparable? So, landlords and tenants will know exactly what that property is, where it is, and how the market will view it. So, I call this the same micro market. So the same street, estate, or immediate neighbourhood, not merely the same postcode district. And even on the same street, you can have some streets that are quite long. One end might be, not so nice, and the other end might be very, very desirable. So these are the kind of things that, people want to actually point out. And rents can differ noticeably between one side of the railway line and the other, or between a road of period conversions and a road of new builds. So can you see how normally you'd just think, oh, you know what, this is my postcode, and just sit back from that. No, you want to actually bring a true like for like. Right. Then again, we want the same kind of property. So match the type. So it can be flat, terrace, semi, detached, however. And the number of bedrooms and where possible, the approximate size, the floor level, outside space, and parking. So a two-bedroom garden flat is not comparable for a two-bedroom sixth floor flat without adjustment. Right. Again, when we're looking for comparables, we're looking for the same condition and offering. So furnished has to be compared to other furnished properties. Recently refurbished against dated, again, that's not going to work. Bills included against bills excluded. Can you see these little nuances that can make a really, really big difference? And it's up to the parties to actually bring these to the tribunal's attention. So, where the comparable is better or worse than the subject property, it's a good idea to say so and adjust. Because the thing is, if somebody's just kind of like being very hopeful, it can put people off. The same moment in time. So, tribunal is valuing the rent at the effective date. So, a day that they actually decide. So evidence from the last 3 months or so is likely to carry far more weight than listings from a year ago. If a market is moving at 3 to 4% a year, stale evidence is going to be the wrong evidence to be bringing forward. Now, achieved rents over and above asking rents is going to be, that's definitely always going to be better. But how do you know what rent has been achieved? So, what a property actually lets for is going to be more important than what it's advertised at. And again, it's not just a question of saying this is how much it went for. It would be a question of producing evidence and how you actually know that that is how much it let for. So on the portals, for instance, if it says, well, no, normally if it says let, then and you look at how many days it's been on the market for. So if it's been on the market for a really short time, you can assume that it let for the full price. If it's been on the market, let's say for a year, then the assumption is going to be they took a reduction in price. So again, these kind of things, they don't seem that important, but I think they are if either party is going to be able to bring a good case. So there is no public register of achieved rents. So all anyone can do is just look on the portals. So that would be Rightmove, it will be Zoopla, on the market, those kind of things. Now I've just spoken about the market. So those ones are good for literally all properties. But if you're looking at rooms and HMOs, then you really want to be looking at somewhere like Spare Room. But I don't know that Spare Room has evidence of properties that are let, because as soon as a property is let on Spare Room, it disappears. So anyway, I don't know how that would be worked out. So ideally, one would search the immediate area. I tend to look at a quarter of a mile within the from the target property itself, and then use the filters. We should use the filters to get the right property type. So if it's a flat, number of bedrooms, current listings, and those marketed, let, agreed. So some portals will let you know what has happened in the past. So again, that's really that can be useful. And what is also good is, particularly for a landlord, to take dated screenshots. So take a screenshot and the date will show on it. So you can try and convince a tribunal that you actually did the research before you decided on the number. So lettings agents, again, they're quite good if you know one in the area, but often they don't like to share that kind of information with anyone who's not actually a surveyor who's doing a mortgage valuation. They're happy to give information on those bases, but not to anyone else. But you don't know. You might be able to get something from them, even if you have to pay. Again, this is all about getting the best from the situation that is at hand. Um, official statistics. So the ONS Price Index of Private Rents publishes the average private rents by local authority and bedroom count. But again, all this is going to do is just be indicative. Then again, the landlord's own records. So a landlord with similar units can put in their own recently agreed tenancies as achieved rent evidence, which is exactly what comparables are. So that, I think, is going to be mainly with HMOs, to say, well, look, you're in room 2, room 4, which is identical to your room. I've just achieved this. So that's the kind of information that we are talking about. Now, how do we present it? So I'm kind of like saying, quality should always try and trump a volume. So don't put in, I wouldn't have thought, maybe like 10 examples. Three would be plenty. 3 excellent ones, more than enough. More than enough. And then, a schedule would also be quite good. So a schedule will show the address, the location, how far away it is from the target property, 0.1 miles, 0.2, a mile, 3 miles, those kind of things. If we're looking at really strong evidence, we'd be looking at anything up to 0.25, which is like a quarter of a mile, in my opinion, anyway. What the asking price was, what was achieved, and if you're putting an achieved amount there, say how you know that that's how that rent was actually achieved. The number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, whether or not utilities are included, whether or not there are any extra, any special things about the property. So if it has a balcony, with far-reaching views, these are the kind of things that we want to be saying. So you've got your target property, which is the property in question, and then you've got the comparables, and you're saying this one is either better, it's the same, or it's not as nice, and you say why. So the size of the property again is going to be important. How many square meters, square feet? Does it have a garden? Yes or no? Does it have access to open space? Yes or no? Does it have any services included? What are the extras that you actually get with that particular tenancy? Is there a swimming pool? Is there a gym? Those kind of things. Is there a Costa on the ground floor? I laugh, but these things are important. Um, then, so what are the mistakes that can be made by people? So if people just cherry pick, so if a tenant, for instance, looks for the cheapest property that might be in the area, or the landlord looks for the most expensive one that might be in the area. And again, as landlords need to be careful. So when looking for comparables, be careful that the landlord isn't looking at something that is being offered on a short let, because that is going to be offered at a much higher price than something that's being offered on a kind of like long-term basis. Another mistake is relying on the asking prices as though they were actually achieved rents. So again, this is where it's important to actually look at this, look at it carefully, and adjust accordingly. Um, Again, seasons can be important. So rents traditionally used to be a bit lower in November, December, January, possibly February. Come March, they always started to uptick again. So again, that can be important. And then, if you compare, across property types without adjustment. So if you are looking, so the target property is say like a 2-bedroom flat, and you are comparing it with a 2-bedroom house, yeah, not really going to work. um Condition again is very important. Is it does it look nice? Is it well maintained, or is it literally falling down? um so that is, I just thought, that it's important to start thinking about these kind of things. And it's important to, because the more we think about it, the more comfortable we get with it, and the more we can actually start to understand exactly what is required. And then, it will be easier to actually deal with all of these things going forward.